Welcome to the GuestX podcast, where my co-host Brian Amaui and I uncover the latest technologies and human-driven initiatives that are raising customer expectations and forever changing how we define customer experience across a host of industries. If you are passionate about creating incredible content and unique experiences, join us as we talk to leading product and experience experts across the globe and learn about how today's most successful brands are setting themselves apart from the competition. Welcome to the GuestX podcast. I'm your co-host, Matthew Loney, with Mr. Guest Experience, Brian Amaui. Brian's sitting in Orlando. You missed Verma.
I know. I almost want to
ask me if it really exists. Like if I've killed you and you're all like AI now, that somewhere, because no one sees you anymore.
This is true until tomorrow when I get to see you.
Yes, you get to see me tomorrow. We're not allowed to talk about tomorrow, right? A very secret project. I think after tomorrow we're allowed to talk about. It's kind of like Fight Club. You can't talk about Fight Club until Fight Club.
Yeah, maybe we'll just have to do a really quick session on that while we're there.
While we're there. Okay. Well,
yeah,
that's what they call it in the industry. I think we're not really in the media industry. We'll call it. We'll talk. If you say words like we're going to tease it, then it sounds like we're a big deal.
Yep. Well, we're coming tomorrow.
We're coming, but you missed.
I honestly had some serious FOMO on Verma this year. It looked like everybody in the industry was there. The show looked absolutely spectacular. People were snapping pictures of the conference rooms and the booths, and you were commenting on how we've elevated the actual conference itself in general.
Yeah, I mean, massive, and like you said, I think 2,500 people don't even recognize it. From a couple years ago, really, 2019, you wouldn't even recognize it. So I'm not sure I enjoyed it as much. I'm very relational, and there are so many people I didn't even get to see. And that's one of the things I loved about going to Verma was, for those who I hadn't crossed with, it was always towards the end of the year. And I think there were still probably 10, 15 on my list that I just never got to get to. But it is, yes, the industry is changing rapidly as, look, you throw this much money and we all know what technology can do to an industry. You come back, there's just a feeling that if you miss 3, 4, 5 months, like you're going to miss a lot. But it's exciting. I think there's really smart people. Our guest today is someone I'm really excited. But the better this industry does, it's going to draw smarter and smarter people. Not that the people we have aren't smart, but like people from outside the industry who are going to come with their own ideas, their own experiences. And we as an industry ought to welcome that. But I do think for those of us who've been in for, I've been in for 7, 8 years, 6 years, 7 years, it's a change. And so we're just going to have to work through it. But let's get into this. This is going to be cool. Yeah,
it is going to be cool. Today's guest is Alexander Limpert. He's an entrepreneur, investor, advisor for the innovative startups in the tech space and in the travel space. His main role is the co-founder and CEO of GuestReady. He's building a wealth of technology and accommodation with a huge focus on brand, especially in the short-term rental space. GuestReady launched its operations in 2016 and is currently serving over 4,000 properties in 30 cities. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Brian. I'm very excited to be here. Thanks very much for the kind intro. And I remember we met about a year ago, must be pretty much exactly 1 year ago for the first time. And finally we made it.
I know it's been an incredible journey. Honestly, I think I must have invited you back at the show last year. And then it's taken us this long to get on a Zoom call, which is pretty amazing considering technology today. It is.
Exactly.
But I'm excited to see that.
There's a lot happening. So, it takes a while, but finally we're here. So that's great.
Yeah. And I think, before we get started with the podcast today, what I'd love to do is just give you an opportunity to talk to our audience, tell them who you are, what you've done, a little bit about the companies that you've built, and then we can dive into some questions.
Sure. And I think, Matt, you actually started really well by saying that people from different industries come in. And I think that's what happened with me, that originally I'm not from this industry. Before starting GuestReady, I was in food delivery, and that shaped kind of how we saw the opportunity in this industry. And how we went about addressing this opportunity and building technology and so on, building GuestReady. My background, I'm originally from Switzerland, and did a bunch of things, landed in food delivery, and then started GuestReady 6 years ago. And the idea was that we saw that short-term rentals is such an amazing big industry that is growing rapidly, that lots of people want to stay in a short-term rental. They prefer it to hotels that can be quite bland, or that don't offer the amenities and the space and so on, the character of short-term rentals. And we saw that there's really good platforms like Expedia, Booking.com, Airbnb that deliver a great booking experience, but then actually the hard work starts after you get the booking, right? We all know that in this industry that the booking is just the first part, and we felt that we could bring more value to both the guests and the owners by building a new type of tech-enabled service provider. And on the owner side, we felt that we can basically bring three things for them. The first is flexibility, that they can be more flexible the way how they use their properties. The second is peace of mind. We take care of all the different aspects for them. The industry is becoming increasingly difficult, lots of aspects to handle the guest experience, the guest expectations are increasing. And then thirdly, also in the end, a lot is also about the income that you can achieve. And we felt that there's a great opportunity to increase the income also for owners by doing all the right things. And then on the guest side, we felt that there's a great opportunity to bring together the best of homes and the best of a hotel. So personally, before being in food delivery, I was a management consultant, traveling a lot for work, staying with the Marriotts and Hiltons of this world, and you know exactly what you get, but it's not very exciting. And personally, I always love to stay a bit more local and love to get that local vibe. But then sometimes you have a great experience and sometimes not. So with GuestReady, our ambition is to bring those two worlds together, have really unique properties. Every one of our properties is pretty much unique. The character, have that space, have those amenities, but then also have that predictable service layer when it comes to cleaning, professional cleaning, hotel quality linen, towels and toiletries and so on, 24/7 guest support, all of these aspects that you would expect from a hotel. So that's sort of the ambition behind and how we started. And maybe a bit of a word about technology then, to already go into that part. In food delivery, we saw that basically without technology, it's very hard to scale, right? You can build processes, but if you don't have the right technology, eventually you're relying too much on people. So you kind of have to have really good technology to guide those processes, so that while you're scaling, you're still able to deliver a great service and to never let your customers down. And that was sort of the premise, that from the beginning we said that eventually, if we want to become really big, we have to have our in-house technology and invest a lot from the beginning into that.
Very interesting. Okay, let's go back to the very, very beginning. Did you guys start managing property? Did you start with one property? Did you acquire a property management company? How did you actually get into the space? Because there've been people in this industry, myself included, that have never scaled to have 4,000 properties in their portfolio. And so it's very interesting to me that you don't come necessarily from the hospitality, Airbnb, vacation rental space, but you came from a different space with the understanding of how to scale, but with not too much knowledge other than staying in these units on the operational side. Did you guys start with a small number of units? How did you actually decide to get into the space? And then how did you start to scale it?
Yeah, I was a host myself, hosting, and then that's where this experience came from. That it's very easy to get bookings, but then actually taking care of all the hard parts thereafter. You have to coordinate a lot between the guests and the cleaners, and especially if you're physically not at the property yourself. And that's where this idea came from. That hey, we can actually offer this service for owners. But yes, we started from the very beginning. We launched our website. We started to do a bit of marketing. We got some inbound leads, and then started to scale from there. And at the very beginning, I was super involved. I was the only person in London. Then we had a few other cities that we were focusing on, and in each city we just had one person. So I had one person in Paris. We actually in the beginning had some operations in Amsterdam that didn't really last too long because of regulations. In the end, we focused mostly on the UK market and the French market, and then added Portugal and Dubai. And this year we launched Spain. So those are the key markets that we're in currently. But yeah, it grew very much from the very early days, one property in each city, to then scaling this up to now over 4,000 properties.
And you guys were very focused on the type of inventory, right? So there was something in particular that you were looking for inside of the properties or the property styles so that you could market them. How did that work?
We have standards, of course, what we want to accept and what not. There's just certain properties, I think, especially also when it comes to the location or when it comes to security, where we can't really make compromises, right? But it's not that we say, okay, like this is the style, and then they're like, if you don't fit exactly that style, then you can't be working with us, because in the end, our ambition is that we can have unique properties, right? I think we're working more to give owners some guidelines and really working with them, because we see each other as partners, and help them to unlock the value of their real estate by giving the right advice and then operating their properties in the right manner. But if you work in places like London or Paris, every property is pretty much different. Every owner, usually these properties are furnished. So unless you want to send away 90% of the owners, you have to be quite flexible.
It's amazing here. One of the, I would say, hot topics right now, right before VRMA, Vacasa laid off 280 employees. You may have heard about that.
Yeah.
The question, I think, revolving around our industry and scalability is a really interesting topic. And I think you bring up technology, and I certainly think that has been a major role that technology has played. The question, I think, or a lot of the questions being asked here in the US, though, is when you start to get outside of, two or three markets, how scalable really is it? And I feel like in Europe, you've got groups like Sykes, yourself, Interhome, that are massive compared to the US. Right? I think, I don't know, other than Vacasa, the next layer down. I mean, we've got a few that I would say are in your world of, less than 10,000, but there aren't very many. There's far less that are in Europe. What is your thoughts around how do you scale this business, but that is still very operationally heavy? Is it possible? And what are the keys, do you think, to doing it? Because obviously you guys have figured out something maybe in Europe that we're still struggling with here in the US.
Yeah, I think it's a very fair point, and it's definitely not easy to scale, right? Because on the one side, it's a very global business where you get travelers from everywhere in the world, and the booking process is pretty much exactly the same, and everything that you handle online is the same. But then when you're actually on the ground, cleaning the homes and making sure everything is ready for the guests, it's a hyper local operation. So the way how we're going about this is actually centralizing and streamlining all the processes that are the same and that can be standardized, and then having technology to guide those processes, and then locally make sure that also our technology is flexible enough on the one side, but robust enough to guide those processes on the other side. So it's a bit. And I think that's on the technology side, and then on people side, because it's still a people business too. You have to have the right incentives and incentivize the local partners to do a good job for you. That's basically what we're doing. Yeah, it's quite important that we also pick markets where we can get a sizable footprint in each of these markets. Because if you just have like 2-3 homes, it's pretty hard to manage remotely. But if if you have a portfolio of like 50 or 100 homes, then actually you can have a bit of a structure locally.
So is that structure, so are you hiring property managers or people with experience in each one of those local markets? Because they change. It is so locally based. I mean, you can't, the culture changes quite a bit. Even just in that region, things change quite a bit. The expectation, the gas changes quite a bit. So are you looking for leaders inside of those markets, and then that leader develops a team around them?
We're not building full teams locally, but we're building, like we're hiring business development people locally, and then actually the actual operations, everything is coordinated centrally, because that can be, like we realize that often you're like, most of the time, even if you're local, you're just sitting in the office and coordinating on the phone. And then we said, okay, if you can do that locally, nowadays with video calls and phone and with technology, you actually always know what's going on. So you don't have to be physically present. But I think what is really important, that somebody understands the market and understands the customer, understands the local regulatory environment and so on. And that's why we hire business developers locally.
And I think there's an important distinction. And so I want to talk, you've mentioned a couple times now, Alex, around your technology. And obviously that is instrumental. And you're taking an interesting now approach, not only of how you've gotten to this point of your tech stack, it being developed, a lot of it internally, but also now kind of through some licensing. But
Yeah.
for the people in the US, I do think it's important because, when people in the US hear about like a Waze who has 100,000. A lot of that portfolio, though, is not managed operationally by a Waze, right? They serve in the US, for our listeners, a lot of their portfolio is handled kind of like Evolve out of Colorado here, where they're really the primary distribution source and marketing arm. And then there's a group who is handling the maintenance and the housekeeping and everything locally. But correct me if I'm wrong, but GuestReady, I mean, you're 4,000, you are managing those properties operationally. Is that true of your entire portfolio?
That's true for the biggest part of the portfolio. So out of those 4,000, actually 2,500 we manage directly, and we do everything. So we do like the full service for the owners, because what we realized, that most owners actually, they don't like, they can list on the OTAs, right? It's very easy now to make an Airbnb listing and get lots of bookings, but what is harder is actually to coordinate be there 24/7, available for your guests, coordinate the cleaning, coordinate the maintenance, and so on. So that's actually what the owners need support on. The listing and booking part, it's becoming easier and easier with the big platforms.
Yeah.
So that's why we focus on that part of why we think that at least that's where we can bring the biggest value add.
So
And
that value add, I think, is coming through the tech, right, Alex? So how you're doing that is really, so talk to us about what you've built, why you decided to build it internally, whether you recommend that as someone who's now on the other side. I always love to ask people, knowing what you know now, would you have still done it? But like, talk to us about where and not only the tech you've built, but where you're putting emphasis as you continue to build out your tech roadmap.
Very good point, and very, very hot debate as well. What do you build in-house and what do you not build in-house and in-source from other parties? There's lots of different vendors out there that you can get ready off-the-shelf software. And I would say for 99% of the property managers, that's probably a good way to go, right? Because actually we raised money to build that software. We raised about $20 million US, and that is a good amount of money to build some nice software. Of course, there's now other players in the industry that raised even more, but for us, it really allowed us to get, I would say, like a really state-of-the-art software. The reason why we said we want to build in-house software is the ambition that we started GuestReady with, and I think, I like to compare it in a way to let's say Uber or food delivery, that you can build a taxi. If you're a local taxi company, you can probably buy some off-the-shelf taxi dispatch software, and that works well. But if you have a certain ambition, then you probably want to build it in-house and really tailor it to your needs, and really also drive the boundary and be at the forefront of innovation. Because actually, I think nobody has, or not many companies have scaled to that size that we are, and encounter the kind of problems that we have now. And I think that's something that we realized, that when we started off, we didn't have a software. We started off actually with a third-party software. And then pretty quickly we realized that, yes, it works, but then as we scaled, we started to run into issues, and especially on back then, task management. How do you coordinate all the cleaning? How do you the owner dashboard, making sure that the owners have all the accesses, that they can open and block their calendars, manage their prices, that they can see all their invoices and so on, that this is all compliant to local regulations, because then each market is different. So a lot on that. And then over time, we just built more and more of these features as we grew. And as you grow, the sort of the topics become very different. When you're just having 5 to 10 properties, maybe it's all about the distribution, getting bookings. But then when you have 50, 100 properties, it becomes about the task management, the coordination. And then when you have like hundreds of properties, it's about how do you keep an overall overview? How do you process the payments? We process like millions of payments millions of dollars of payments, and we have to make sure everything is reconciled and everything is submitted on time to the owners. So we built a really cool solution for that, where we have a segregated client fund account for each of the owners that is sitting there. And we all know these horror stories also of property managers going bust, taking all the money from the guests, and the owners are left out of the pocket. We definitely didn't want to see that happening to our owners, and give them a lot of confidence that their money is safe. And it's just all system guided, and there's no human error. So these kind of as you grow, the topics become different. And that's basically how we build it. And in food delivery, it was the same. Initially, we used third-party dispatch software, and then you just realize that the more interfaces you have between softwares, the more they don't really talk that well to each other. And then in the end, the whole experience just declines. And I think that's very good for us as well, that everything is integrated, and in the end, it results in a great experience for the owners and the guests.
So this property management software is very sophisticated. It sounds like it's very sophisticated. I mean, it worked for you guys. You've got over 4,000 properties using it. You guys decided to open the software up to the general community, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So in 2019, we started to open it up, and basically whenever, before that, whenever we talked to other smaller property managers about our software, they were like, wow, this actually sounds super interesting. And it's like exactly the kind of tools that I would need. And then eventually we said, okay, then why don't we open this up actually, and give it to partner property managers. And then now we have 1,500 properties managed by partner property managers with our software. And many of them are actually there for since the very beginning. We pretty much had nobody leaving us so far, and adding more and more. And I think that's becoming a bigger and bigger part of our business, because in the end, the software is there. I think the unique part is really that it's a software developed from a property manager for other property managers, right? Because a lot of the other softwares, it's very hard actually to deliver really great software unless you're very close to the customer. And we're extremely close to the customer because we're our own customer. And we get feedback from our operational teams on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. And the feedback loops that you have, or just the iterations that you can run is so quick that I think this is quite different from how a software firm that doesn't know actually property management, how they would develop their software.
This was always one of those key points, Matt. I speak about it quite a bit, which is a lot of the software that we have in the industry were built by technologists that came in and saw an opportunity, but really didn't have a clue about how the industry works. And so the idea that a property manager has gone in, spent the time managing properties, understood what they want, developed it successfully, and then has launched it to the marketplace is very unique as a software in the industry to the rest of the technology that's in the space. Uniquely enough as well, the people that developed it are in the technology space. So I wonder, you know, how does this affect our industry? Because in my mind, this is where success really comes in. If we build proprietary technology that works with the understanding of the backbone of how things work, then does that make our operations that much smarter?
Yeah, no, it is interesting. I mean, you've got a few, I would say, that at one time or another, streamline. I think it,
Yeah.
if they go back to the very beginning, I think of PMSs. Streamline started as a property management company, a little bit of a similar story, and built something that they needed. It's interesting because it also ticks the debate I think that's going on right now, which is, with some of these larger companies, are they a tech company? Very different valuation. Vacasa went to market in the US, went, public, pushing we are really a tech company. Operating revenue trades at a very different multiple and off of different metrics. But I do think that there is, to your point, some real value. And I like what Alex said in that even if you have the money, we do this at Exploring. We love to take off the shelf products to start. One, because it's speed, right?
Mhm.
But two, even the best technologists that I've ever met, it sharpens your vision of what you're going to someday need to build. If you sit there with a blank slate, sometimes it's tough to imagine where different things are going to take you and what you're going to need to solve that problem. And some of it you could have never have seen, but if you take something off the shelf, you get to get into it and get your hands dirty, which I think is that's the interesting part for me is that Alex, your group, I mean, and I'm sure I'd love to hear if that's been an experience, but it wasn't like you were a group that said, okay, we want to start from the very beginning. We're going to build our own technology and we're going to be operators. You kind of like, we're going to be operators. We're going to use other tech, then figure out where that tech falls short before we start building our tech, right? If somebody didn't give you a $20 million check and a complete blank slate, it wasn't all blue sky at that point, I guess.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I guess we started with the vision already that we would have to build our own technology, right? If we want to get
Right.
to that size of an Uber or to that size of some of the very large delivery companies that are out there, you have to have your own tech stack. But what exactly we build in house and what exactly we bring in from outside, we didn't have a set mind on the beginning. And even now I think it's not that we're opposed to also opening up our API and integrating with other software. We're integrated with Price Labs and Beyond Pricing, for example. So they're integrating with us, and there's certain aspects that it makes sense to also allow third parties to focus on very specific areas that they do really well. I think what it was really important for us that we control the core and that we make sure that everything that is core to our business is really aligned and the different parts talk to each other. And for example, one example is the mailbox that we have, or we have a virtual call center where that is also actually in the software available for any other property managers using us. So when a guest calls us, immediately the reservation pops up of that guest because they call from the guest's number, right? So it's not, we don't have to ask them, oh, which reservation are you? And and so on, which is quite awkward. And sometimes so immediately we know what guest it is. And the same when we get a message, then all the details of that reservation are just right there at the tip of your fingers in the messaging inbox. And a lot of these, it's just that there's so many different parts, and there's so much information that if you want to work efficiently, you have to have it all at the right space. And it's very hard to actually do that if you piece together different parts of the different softwares.
This is one of those areas. I mean, to me, that's just intelligent. We talk about management of guests and understanding your guests, knowing where they're at in their travel space. The hotel space does this really well. They understand their guests. They've got, all sorts of rewards programs, but they can do that because they understand and they know how the guest travels. Tell us a little bit about what you guys are planning with GuestReady and Rental Ready, and how you envision the future of our space. And are you considering at all any types of rewards programs? Where are we with that space?
Yeah, sure. And I think we actually didn't introduce Rental Ready. Rental Ready is the technology that we've been talking about all the time. So Rental Ready is the technology, Guest Ready is the property management company, and that's the two companies that we're running. The way forward, how we see it, I mean, definitely on the guest side, there is a lot that we have in the works. We just launched our guest app where they can, where guests get a lot more information. They can manage their bookings, they can book activities, they can book extra services, and so on. So there's a lot to be done there, where we can offer really, really cool experiences and extra services to the guests through that platform as well, very seamlessly. And then on the Rental Ready side, yeah, it's about bringing that to more property managers. I think so far we've been really focused on the product. We haven't really been focused too much on the marketing of that software to property managers, but we're now starting to build a bit more of a team around that, and really starting to bring that to market, and we're seeing very good results. So that's kind of what's in line. And then, yeah, for GuestReady overall, expanding to new markets. We have entered Spain this year. It's a fantastic market, and there's many more markets in Europe that we're not part of yet, and where we want to bring our service to. So there's a lot of very exciting topics waiting for us.
If I could, and I know we're starting to get a little low on time, Alex, but one of the interesting questions I heard the other day asked on a panel, it was actually in Spain at the Vitor Summit, was the focus on supply versus demand. Not that you can't focus on both, right? But it does. And now I'm going off that panel. As I thought about the question when it was being asked, it does feel like to me that there's been a little bit of an overemphasis, here in the US, certainly driven by Airbnb and Vrbo have been battling it out for supply, almost to the suggestion that demand is endless and that part will just figure itself out if you have the supply. I actually take the reverse view that I feel like if you own the gas, you'll never want for supply. In fact, you'll have your pick of supply. But I mean, is that an academic argument, or not an argument? Is that an academic just question of which matters? They both matter. I'm sure you probably have some great experience from food delivery, right? Who has this exact, I mean, it's a multi-sided marketplace, but how do you think through that?
I think it's also based on the position where you're at and what your part of the service is. So I think if you're actually a demand platform, then it's really about driving that demand. So in food delivery, it was much more about the demand. If you get the demand, then the supply would come. But of course, it helps to have great supply to get the demand as well, right? So it's a bit of a chicken and egg. But I think the harder part in food delivery was to get the demand. And I felt that actually on the booking platform, on the OTA side, booking.com, certainly they're very much focused on the demand. I felt, and actually Airbnb, yeah, they talk a lot about exclusive supply, but in the end, when you look where their policies are going, it's very much focused on the guest as well, and driving that great guest experience, and therefore getting more repeat guests and getting more bookings, and then the supply will follow that. I think for us as property managers, we of course I think we're always really focused on the supply because the owners are such an important client for us. But in order to keep the owners happy, you have to keep the guests happy, right? And you have to get really good ratings. Our ambition is to be at the 4.8 out of 5. And I think in most of the markets, we're very close to that and hitting that number. So that's, that's our ambition. And we just see when we do a good job on the guest side, then we get good ratings, we get good income, happy guests, and in the end, that leads to happy owners as well, right? Because they see that their properties are occupied, that they get the money, and therefore I think while naturally it's easy to focus on the supply as a property manager, in the end, if you leave out of sight the demand and the guests, then it will come and bite you eventually.
I think it's very interesting. I think you guys have done a fantastic job. I've been watching you from the US and was very excited to meet you over at the European Event Tour last year. So we appreciate you coming onto the show. I think we're going to have you back because there's so many questions, book direct movements that we're talking.
I was going to ask about that too. Like, I just don't have enough time.
Enough time. So I think, if at some point we'll have you back on and we'll dive a little bit deeper into some of the strategies that you guys have with some of those movements in the European market, so we can learn from them here in the US.
But of course, we barely scratched the surface now in those couple of minutes that we talked.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Alex. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate your time. We know that it's a big commitment. You've got obligations all over the place, and just spend the time with us today. It's been great.
Oh, the pleasure was on my side. Thanks so much, Matt and Brian. Was really great to talk to you.
Thanks, Alex.
That's it for this week's episode of GuestX. Be sure to sign up for our email list at guestxpodcast.com. That's guest, the letter X, podcast.com. And follow us on your favorite podcast apps so you never miss an episode. He is Mr. Guest Experience Brian O'Malley, and I'm Matthew Loney, signing off and reminding you to always create a customer experience worth talking about.
This podcast is a Hospitality.fm production.